Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Women in Leadership Talk podcast. Wow, I have to say, we have an exciting author, individual, president, so many things I could say about Cheryl today. But Cheryl, great to have you here on the show. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for the invitation. That's great.
Well, we're thrilled to have you, and we have so much to cover today. You can see in the background, if you're watching this visually, that Cheryl wrote a book called Face to Face, and this really incorporates a lot of fantastic leadership lessons. But really, how do we deal with disruption and uncertainty? So we're going to get into that today. But before we go there, let me just welcome our audience. We're so grateful for you to be here. You're listening to us in 48 countries, maybe 50 by now. So we thank you for that. We know that you have a choice. There's many, many podcasts out there. And, it means a lot to us that you're tuning in to these amazing women that are coming on and sharing their stories. So thank you for being here. So let me give you a little bit of background on Cheryl before we jump in, because I know you're going, well, why should we listen to Cheryl?
Good question.
So, yes, fair question. So Cheryl has done a number of things. She was the president of a hospital, which I can't even imagine, how stressful that in itself was. But she's currently the CEO and founder of a company called Recalibrate. And this is a firm that's dedicated to the helping audacious leaders take their organizations to the next level. And Cheryl, I know we're going to get into this a little bit, but really this was driven by your experiences as a president of a hospital and the many complexities that you were dealing with, and then always still being able to be in that 99th percentile while you were navigating all the complexities. And so Recalibrate has sort of been born, let's say, from all those lessons that you learned. And you've had this quite an impact globally, just with, not just mid-market, but small, mid, and large organizations around the world to help them, with a framework on how to recalibrate and how to build questions that help them really drive performance in their organizations. So that gives you a little precursor as to who Cheryl is, but I really want you to take note on the book that she has written. And we're going to jump in and talk to her about how she went from president of the hospital to thriving author to thriving business owner. So Cheryl, take it away. Tell us how we got where we got to.
Well, I can certainly say none of it was planned.
It never is.
I got out of college and ended up starting a cleaning business with a friend because we got real jobs and decided the real jobs didn't quite do what we wanted. And we ended up selling that to an existing company and then kind of going and doing other things. And so I've had the really fabulous experience of both starting my own thing, quote unquote, working for myself and working for others. And a lot of people rocket one or the other, right? They're like, you tell me what to do, I got it. Or don't even think about telling me what to do, I'll do it, right?
So true.
Right. We tend to fall in one of those two camps. And it has been amazing to have both of those sets of experiences throughout my career. And as you mentioned, I did end up as a hospital president. I did everything short of running to Alaska to make it not happen, right? I was part of the hospital that I worked in and that I led ultimately was one at the time of about 15 hospitals and a whole slew of other organizations under the umbrella organization I worked for, so the health system.
Okay.
And they had just started their first, high potentials program. And so I was one of 30 some odd people in that program. And so we got paired with people, and I had the fabulous experience of being paired with the person who was like third in command of our organization. And he was just amazing. And I remember saying to him, don't ask me to be hospital president. I don't want to be a hospital president. It's not what I want to do. I want to work on population health. I want to be kind of real forward leaning on what can we do to not need to end up in a hospital. That's my passion. Well, things changed. They decided, who was going to do that. And it wasn't me. Right. And then he comes and he says, I want you to be president. I'm like, I told you, right? You're asking me, aren't you? You're just really asking me. And so I decided, okay, I guess I'm going to do this. Right. And so I went from being director of quality, risk management, and operations in the hospital to being asked to serve as president, which I did for 5 years.
Right.
And we had, I mean, it was already a really, really strong hospital. And so what happens in healthcare, for those that aren't familiar with it, is in the US at least, I can't speak for other places, you have a government payer, Medicare, right? And then you
Mhm.
have other private payers if you have, insurance through your job. And they tell you what to measure. They're like, well, if you want to get approval to treat our patients, then you will do this. And we will pay you this. And you will report on this. And this is how we want you to do, right? So it's very much coming from the outside in. And so that was my job for quite a while, was to measure how we were doing against those metrics. And so at the time, and a lot of hospitals have unfortunately closed, but at the time there was 5,000-ish hospitals in the US. And so we were measured against most of them.
Mhm.
And when we were measured on these standards that were set for us, and they could be employee engagement, they could be patient satisfaction, their quality metrics, we ended up staying at 99th percentile, meaning one of the best consistently year over year over year on these measurements. And so that's where the 99th percentile, or what we call B99, comes from. And so it was really you made a comment that is incredibly logical, that it would be really stressful.
Mhm.
And I expected it to be, but it wasn't. And
Oh,
I was
okay.
really shocked. I was kind of like, well, how is this possible? Right. Because for me, when I sat back, I thought, why is this not like, woo? So for me, the quality and the risk management is the heart of healthcare.
Right.
And if we're, to me, that was the weighty responsibility. So adding on a higher level of operations than I already had just wasn't. It's like we will always do the best we can, because if we don't manage ourselves well, we won't exist to provide great care. But
Mhm.
it's the care we provide that I'm like, oh. And so it was just a really interesting thing, because I fully expected it to be like, and it wasn't. It really wasn't. And so that was kind of an interesting experience for me. A good one. I'd much rather that than be stressed out of my mind, right?
I was just gonna
I
say,
don't
I mean,
like
that's
that. I don't like being stressed. I don't like wanting to leave me somewhere until I feel better. I just don't like that. Um, but ultimately what happened was that I had people on my team who were going out to other outside areas and getting training. Right?
Mhm.
And two of them, I kid you not, one clinical, one non-clinical, came back in the same week and said, it sucks out there, was one statement. I like our bubble, was another. I can't
Mm.
believe what's happening out there. That would never happen here. And that was really I will call it a kick in the patootie, right? To go out and help other leaders, because it's like, no
Mm.
one says, I want to run an organization that sucks the life out of me, doesn't do well, has everybody on my case, makes me not enjoy life. That's what I want. Or nobody, I have yet to run into anyone who says that.
Yes, I would agree with
Yeah,
that.
yeah, it's just, it's like, hello. And so for me, it was really around, we had kind of our processes in place.
Mm.
We knew what we were doing. We just did them. It was just it's the way we rolled. It's the way we ran. It was everything. But I'm like, so you can pull me out and it'll be fine. But there's other places that want to do this and don't know how.
Mm.
And so it really felt like an obligation to go, I need to go share this. It's not about Cheryl's amazing, Cheryl's wonderful, because it's all about your team and how you structure things and all that good stuff. But it was really, that was my push. And so that's how we ended up founding Recalibrate, which was really just in service of, if you want to do this, and if any of your listeners are involved in kind of, personal work and all that good stuff, there are really only about 2% of the people in this world are willing to do that work.
Mhm.
And it lines up with organizations, because organizations are people, right?
Always.
It's funny how that works.
I was going to say, and it's amazing how often we forget that.
That petty little detail.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's just a small thing, but
It's almost insignificant. You really don't need to focus on it. So the 99th percentile really lines up with that from an organizational standpoint,
yeah,
because you only have a small number of people who are leading the organizations who are willing to say, this is what we're going to be.
yeah.
And sometimes it won't feel so fun, and sometimes it'll feel amazing, but ultimately it's going to be really awesome. So we're going to do what we need to do to get there. And so that's what Recalibrate is really about, is helping leaders take the least painful, quickest route to that.
Mm-hmm.
Because none of us have time to experiment at this point. None of us have, I don't have enough to do today. What should I add to my list? What? I mean, I'm missing
Please.
something, right? Yeah. We don't, again, I have not met anybody in the last 5 years that's ever said that to me. So that's why we exist, is to say, if this is what you want to do, let's help you basically buy speed and get there faster.
Yeah.
With a lot less angst and misdirections and wanderings and all that good stuff.
So why do you think, Cheryl? Because I love what you're saying, and I'm so with you. Because
But
the same, I believe people, they don't wake up in the morning and look in the mirror and go, I'm going to make this a really crappy day. Like, I want to
uh,
make everybody miserable around me. I just don't believe we do that.
no,
But why do you think people let the stuff, right? Like clearly your perspective is let's get rid of the stuff
mhm.
and let's make this as easy and fruitful as possible and in service to others. So why do so many people resist or struggle to even see that?
I'm going to be unpopular here.
That's okay, please do. I love controversy.
Well, to me, it's just truth. I mean, it's too many of us have kind of drank the Kool-Aid and think everything is about us. We've kind of
Yeah,
regressed to
yeah.
2-year-olds, and it's about me. It's all about me. And if I don't get what I want, then I'm going to have a temper tantrum and I'm going to make you miserable. And we've just allowed that mindset to infect our organizations. And then your leaders are like, well, do I placate you or do I placate you? Well, I placated you and now you're, put it bluntly,
Mhm.
you're pissed off. So now I go over to you and now you're really mad. And then your eye is completely off. And you have basically told everybody that the way to get attention is to have a temper tantrum.
Yeah.
And when you do that, even somebody who doesn't like having a temper tantrum goes, well, I'm kind of getting left out here. So I guess I'm going to have one too. And so you are one of the phrases that, and I would love to take credit for it, but I read it and it is just stuck with me and I have used it. I don't think there's any single client we've ever worked with that I have not said this to. And it's like, what you permit, you promote.
Love that. And you're right.
And because really one of the things that was really, this was hard for me when I first became president. I didn't realize how much everybody was watching absolutely everything I did. And I don't mean
100%.
in a hateful way, but just like, oh, and I'm not really, the way I'm talking to you is kind of the way I talk to my folks. I'm not like, it's like, well, you looked at me cross-eyed and you have on the wrong shade of purple today. I mean, that's just not my gig. But you would see how people are just like, oh, and I'm like, okay, I need to really be careful and make sure that it's okay, right? It's okay. It's all right. It's okay. Right? We're all good. It's all good. It's fine. And if there's
Mhm.
something going on that's not so great, you'll hear it from me, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it's okay. We'll be fine. But we've just moved away from relationship. We've
Yeah.
moved away from what we exist to do. And we've moved away from, I have expectations of you if you get a paycheck from here. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
We've lost that. We've treated it as if it's a right. And it is not a right. It is a gift you were given to be brought into someone's organization to help them do something in service that's bigger than all of you.
Yeah.
And when I was younger, I mean, letting people go, anything like that, that was just horrifying to me.
Mm.
As I've gotten older and seen how a few people, or even one really gifted person, who's very toxic, can just like eat away at everything good you've done.
Oh,
And
yes.
it's like, that is your obligation as the leader to say, you don't get to be this way here
Yeah.
because this is not who we are. And so, unfortunately, to kind of circle back to the original question, we have allowed this idea in the way, and I don't know if this is as nuts in Canada as it is here in the US, but we have allowed everything to become, it's all about me. And it's about what I want, and you owe it to me. And I'm like, excuse me?
Yeah.
No, 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 sorry. I mean, we can have so much fun together and do great things, but we're not being held hostage to individual people.
Yeah.
Um, and so that to me is really, and you end up when you're exhausted, and I can say this from personal experience, you're not thinking well. You're not processing well. You're reacting. You're not responding.
Yeah.
You don't have any bandwidth to sit down and go, okay, right? Because you're just like this all the time. And
Mhm.
that's part of a leader's responsibility, is to protect their own little bubble, because people are looking to them to be able to do that. I mean,
Yeah.
for me, it was actually, I learned this in a really odd place. I was in a facilitated learning session. There's probably 30 of us. And we were in, and you don't see it much anymore, but it's kind of like the lecture hall thing, right? So if you're here, the person behind you is up above you, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And so there was someone behind me that was just hijacking all of this. And the instructor was letting her. And I went up to the instructor and I said, I'm getting pretty frustrated because I've paid to be here too.
Yeah.
And this person is trying to take it in a way that's not what you said this was going to be about. So it would be really awesome if you would rein her in and not give her quite so much attention because it's really distracting from everybody else. And for me, that was like, wow, because
Mhm.
she was the leader in the room.
Right.
And so that was, if you don't do it, other people will, or
Sure.
they'll give up. And so it was a really painful because she didn't rein her in. She just let her steamroller the rest of the day.
Ooh. Okay.
But it was a really great lesson in when you're leading, you're taking responsibility to
Mhm.
protect everyone
Yeah.
and everything. And sometimes that means saying to somebody, this is not how we do this here. You want to do this, there's the door, right? It's just not that hard. And we're afraid to do that. So I think
Well,
it's a long answer. It's a combination of factors, but we live as people in an environment and we bring that experience with us. We don't leave it at the door when we
yeah.
walk through the threshold, or whether it's our office or corporate building or whatever. Right.
Mhm. Well, I love what you shared there, and you took me back to an experience that I had recently with a group that I was working with, and one of the leaders showed up poorly.
Yeah.
and, and I said to the leader, like I didn't do it in front of the group, of course, but
Right.
I pulled the leader to the side and I said, "What are you thinking? You
Yeah.
cannot show up like this.
Yes.
Like people are looking at you as the person that they're supposed to model behaviors after." And oh, I love it when that confetti drops. It got excited.
Yeah.
But I said to this person, I said, like, you can't show up that way.
Yeah.
And it was so fascinating to your point, Cheryl, because the person he said to me, he goes, "Oh, I'm sorry if I ruined your session." And I said, "This has nothing to do with my session. First of all, you didn't ruin my session,
Yeah.
but you have an obligation to the 16 other leaders sitting in the room that are looking at you as a role model.
Mm-hmm.
And your behavior said, it's okay for me to show up with a temper tantrum,
Yeah.
and it's okay for me to misbehave in this
Mhm.
environment, and there are no consequences." And I
Mhm.
said, "You will not be allowed in my session behaving
Mhm.
that way." And it was an interesting sort of a jolt to his system, because it was like, oh, I didn't realize that I was even badly behaving. And I'm like, so
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
That's
how
the
then do we
first.
check ourselves at the door when
Yeah.
you come in every day?
Mhm.
Because you can't show up that way, not as a
Mm-mm.
leader.
Mm-mm.
Okay. Like that's just not acceptable. So fascinating.
Mhm.
So yes, it happens in Canada too.
Okay.
It's
Sorry.
everywhere. But
I
I
had
love
a
what you,
feeling, but I didn't want to
yeah,
presume,
yeah.
right? So it's
No,
been a
you're
while
bang
since I've
on.
worked up in Canada. So
Well, no, and you're absolutely right. And what you shared about who am I, if I placate you, does that mean I have to placate you as well? Like really asking yourself these questions, and
Mhm.
why are we tolerating bad behavior?
Mhm.
Yeah, because that spreads. It is like the analogy I like to use is it's like cancer in an
Mhm.
organization.
Mhm.
Once you let it unleash a little bit, it's going to spread. And so if you don't nip it in the butt, then it becomes a bigger problem.
And here's a really sad reality. The negative stuff or the wrong information will move at the speed of light.
Oh,
And the
yes.
good stuff is like molasses uphill. And I
Yeah.
don't know why that is. I've just learned through experience that it is. And so to your point, it's got to be really clear. I mean, when we would bring people in, there were different group interviews they would go through in the hospital setting through their
Right.
peers, their potential peers. And the peers, if the peers were like, no, 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 you don't want to work with them, then they didn't get extended an offer. And then I would meet with them when they first came on. And I would basically say, we have worked really hard to be an amazing organization. And here's what we do and what we deliver. And we are very protective of that. So we are so excited that you're here. And I am asking you today, anytime from right now that you see things that we could do better or you saw done somewhere else, you tell us
Mhm.
because we can learn from you. And when you're first fresh is when you're going to be like, whoa,
Sure.
right? So share it. I said, that being said, because we're very protective, if you start to disrupt what we built, you won't get to stay here.
Yeah.
So let's just be really clear about that right now. So it's that double-edged thing of we want to hear from you. We want to learn from you. We want to be made better because you're here, but don't screw it up. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's not that you can't make mistakes because as long as we're breathing, we do. But
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like, don't
Of
be
course.
malevolent about it. Right. Don't think that this organization is here for you like you're a 2-year-old because we're
Yeah.
not. Right.
Yeah. Well, and that's such great transparency in
Mhm.
early days of somebody
Mhm.
joining an organization, because it's like a bicycle wheel, right?
Mhm.
Each person plays a role
Mhm.
in, or a spoke in that wheel,
Mhm.
in making sure that it runs smoothly. If
Mhm.
one gets bent
Yeah.
or pops out, right, it throws the whole rhythm of that bicycle
Mhm.
wheel off.
Mhm.
And people sometimes, to your point, when you were saying we've gotten to this society where we think it's all about us, right?
Mhm.
Our needs, our wants versus the greater collective.
Mhm.
That becomes so important to
Mhm.
realize that it takes each of us to make
Mhm.
that wheel go very smoothly.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that kind of leads me into face to face.
Nice.
So I want to talk about your book, and just before we jumped on live with everybody, Cheryl and I were talking about her book, and I love how, just to give you the quick, I mean, she went on this incredible safari that could have been life and death, and she's incorporated leadership lessons into this book. So I would highly recommend have a read,
Mhm.
because I love how you've brought it to life.
Mhm.
And yeah, I really do. And I loved how, when you talked about in the early, like when you first got to the safari and the testing of, because she was on horseback, just to, so our audience knows what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Um, having that gentle horse in the beginning, Teo, I think was
Mhm.
the name, right?
Mhm.
Having that gentle horse, and then as you get more comfortable, you upgrade, right?
Mhm.
But talk about how that inspired you, because that's kind of like, I was trying to put myself in your shoes, and I'm thinking, like, going on a safari is one thing, and being
Right.
in a Jeep, but being on horseback is a
Yeah.
completely different experience.
It's because you have more brain cells than I demonstrated having. Yes.
Oh, I honestly, like, I was like, wow, like, how courageous are you?
Yeah.
But that also speaks to leadership as well, and
Mhm.
trust, right? That level of trust that you had for your guides,
Mhm.
and the horse. Like, I mean,
Mhm.
like, but talk to us about what inspired you to take this leap. Because I would say this is like, not many people would be able to do this. And the way you've brought it all together in the lessons learned, I think, was just beautiful with respect to disruption
Mhm.
and uncertainty.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah,
so the way the book is organized is each chapter, the first part of each chapter is just a straight up story of one of the encounters we had. Most are on horseback. A few were in a wide open Land Rover, really not a whole lot of protection, but it sort of makes you feel good, right? So a few of them were from there. But it was each chapter will tell you what that was like to try and bring you there, because exactly to your point, very few people will ever be able to do this because you have to be an experienced rider. This
yeah.
is not the time to go, which stirrup do I put my foot in?
Yeah,
No,
no.
right? So that limits it, number one. And having not the requisite number of brain cells to think it's a good idea is also a good help, right? The second half of each chapter, though, is a leadership principle that I pulled from that encounter. And then smattered throughout, I have a fabulous illustrator who we worked together to kind of do a little illustration caption for each chapter. Had great fun with that. And then there's images in there that are mine. So all of the images in the book are ones that I took. What I had a friend who invited me to do it because I didn't even know it was a thing. I'm like, safaris, woo, baby, that's enough, right? But she's like, horseback. I'm like, okay, prey animal with predators. Sounds brilliant, right? And so I had, even with that, a wrong idea of what it was like. So for any of your listeners who ride horses and go out on trail rides, what that means is you park your tush on your horse and y'all just wander down a trail or through the woods or whatever. And whatever you see, you see. And sometimes it's pretty amazing. And sometimes it's like those leaves were really cool. I mean, you don't see any wildlife. Out here, what I learned on the very first day was, oh no, we see tiger tracks. Let's go see if we can find the tigers. And I'm like, or lions. I'm sorry, there are no tigers in South Africa. And I was just like, okay. Right. All right. And so I, again, had absolutely no plan to write a book. I just wanted to kind of come back alive, because that was literally, it was about 10 days before there had been a poacher that had, I believe, killed an elephant, and a lion killed the poacher.
Mm.
And so everybody's like, are you still going? Are you still going? Are you still going? And I'm like, yes, 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 yes. But you can stop asking me now. All right. And so I just wanted to go have fun. But it was literally on the very first full ride that I was thinking immediately of all the leadership principles, all the team dynamics, all the outcomes that you have as an organization. And so I'm like, okay, well, I'll just do a few blog posts and take a few photos and call it good. And then later that day, I was like, oh, nuts. There's just too much, right? And because sometimes I don't know when to stop, I decided, well, I don't want it to be just about me, kind of back to our earlier conversation.
Mhm.
So I could certainly have filled up each chapter with kind of my take on the principle and my experience, but I wanted it to be way richer for people, because too many of
Mhm.
the leadership books that are out right now are kind of cookie cutter.
Mhm.
They say the same thing. They talk to the five same people, and that's great if those five same people run your kind of organization and your role. But if they don't, it doesn't really help. You're
Yeah.
like, well, if I ever get there, that'll be nice, So it's not really something you can grab and use. And for me, like with the whole kind of the B99 guiding questions framework, the point of that is to help as many organizations as possible get to that point. So I really wanted the book Face to Face to be actionable, to be tangible. And so I talked to about 25 other leaders from around the globe,
Mhm.
all sorts of roles. I mean, everything from an EVP at Unilever to someone who runs the best Chick-fil-A in the US, right? I mean,
Yes, I love that
all
story.
right, all over the map. And I was very clear with all of them that I want things that are very tangible. So I would ask them a question, usually kind of an off the wall question based on the principle I had pulled out of that chapter.
Mhm.
The hard part was figuring out who to put where, because I wanted to kind of mix them up, and there was more awesomeness than I could put in the book, even though the book got pretty long anyway. But that was really the bit. There was just too much stuff in there to not make it a book. So again, an accident.
Mhm. Oh, no, no, no. There's never an accident, Cheryl. It's definitely very intentional. And so many great stories of how you've pulled different styles of leaders into the story. But even in, like, what I was loving is, first of all, you made it very rich with the
Mm,
experience itself, with regards to, helping somebody understand, if you're not a horse person or a rider, understanding the logistics of what happens, right? And even, like, I mean, as a kid, I rode a lot, Western style, grew up in, Tennessee, Virginia, and knowing when a horse is nose to butt, you are going to get kicked or you're going to get bit, or
mm,
and so, knowing that you're out looking for, the black rhinoceros or lions or elephants or whatever it may be, it's not, again, it goes back to what you were saying earlier. It's not just about you. It's
mm-mm,
about the horse. It's about the person in front of you, the person behind you, watching your guide. Like, as a leader, you're firing on all cylinders.
mhm.
And so I love how you brought all of that together in the book, um, to take the experience, but then how do you apply that as a leader?
Mm. Well, thank you. It's always awesome to hear that it lands the way I hoped, right? So thank you for that.
Yeah, no, my pleasure, my pleasure. And so when you think about, um well, so the the sentence is a guide to leading more skillfully in times of great disruption and uncertainty. We are at a pivotal time in our world where, to your point, things are moving so fast and the complexities are so great. It's tough for leaders to know everything. And so you really do have to be in that place where you can ask great questions and navigate all those complexities. And so I know one of the things that you have put together for our audience is a quiz, right? Maybe just talk about why you built this quiz. How does that help somebody? Just give some insight into the quiz.
Sure, great. And so for me, what happened with the B99 guiding questions framework is it is organized as questions, because I'm a perfect annoying 2-year-old. That's just my
Curious.
gift, my natural gift, right? And so what I did was, when I was leaving the hospital and launching Recalibrate, I'm like, well, everybody would say to us who observed us, because you have a lot of outside observers come, and they're not looking to make nice, right? That's just not what they're there for. But they would routinely say, you'll make it look easy. You make it look easy. What do you do? And so I really sat down and go, okay, because I was part of a larger health system, and because I was around a lot of other leaders outside of the system, I'm like, there's a lot of fabulous people doing a lot of amazing things and really, really strong leaders. So what is it that we as a hospital did differently so that we landed consistently at 99th percentile performance? And so that people would say you made it look easy. And so that's really how the guiding questions framework was born. It was my reverse engineering what we did that I didn't see others doing, or doing parts of it, because I love it. People will say, well, which one do I need to do? And I'm like, no.
All of them.
Anybody could do just one. It's the interplay of all of them. I kind of think of them. At first I called them drivers, but as I sat with it more, I thought, they're really more puzzle pieces. Because if you have a piece missing, then it's like, well, that looks really awesome, but you're missing a part. And so it doesn't work. It's also in the shape of a wheel. And so it kind of gives you the sense that this is always moving, right? It's not, you don't have the luxury of going, well, in 2003, I sat down and looked at and answered that question. Why do I need to do it again? And with the pace of change now, it's like faster, faster, faster. You need to have the discipline to sit down and look at these things. So the questions are organized. For example, one of the drivers, the first one, is clarity. And it's fascinating to me because for me, it's like, why do you exist as an organization? Why are you taking up space? Why are you taking up resources? Why do you exist? The number of people, the clients, when we first start working with them, that will say, oh, well, we exist to get this product out to the market, or we exist to do this, or we exist to do that. And I'm like, wow, fascinating to me. It's like, no, you don't. Right? You exist to make whoever your them is better because you exist. It's not about you earning your bonus. It's not about you getting your thing out there. I'm not saying that's not a cool thing, because it's awesome. But it's been fascinating to me to see how people understand the questions, because it diagnoses that it's still all about us.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the questions that goes into calendar, because it's like, if I look over your shoulder, if you and I were sitting down and you say, these things are important to me, and I'm like, cool, can I look at your calendar? Are you working on what you say is important? Most of us aren't. We're just not. We're working on something else, the latest fire, the latest thing, whatever it might be. And I'm not making fun of people, because, it could be just, I need to go look at cats for 5 minutes. Whatever it is that you're doing.
Exactly.
But often it's just not about what you've said is important. And my grandmother, bless her heart, said to me one time, she said, you make time for what you want to do.
Yeah, it's true.
And so it's like, you have to be tacitly willing to say, I guess you're right.
Yeah. No,
if
it's
I'm not
true.
doing it, it's because I don't find value in it for whatever reason, whether I say I do or not. So in any event, there's multiple questions around the framework, but what makes it unique is there's not only a question for the leader, there's a question for the teams, whether they're ad hoc or permanent teams. There's a question for an individual on the team or in the organization, and there's a question for the organization as a whole. And so this framework, because I want people to be able to use it and learn from it, is on my website. You can just go look up the tab that's got B99 and they can go pull it down and look at it. But the other thing with the quiz is it allows you to answer some different questions for the different puzzle pieces. And it will give you, there's 2 quizzes because the tool that I was using wouldn't allow me to do what I wanted to do. So I had to do 2 quizzes. So I wanted to do, what you're strongest at and what's biting you. And you couldn't do
Mm-hmm.
it in 1 quiz. So there's 2 quizzes. The first one is, where are you really like, oh, baby, we could learn from you. And where are you like, boy, this is the fact that you're struggling here is hurting you and it's hurting your team and your organization. So there's 2 quizzes. And so it just has additional questions beyond what you see on the framework. And it gives you your top 3 or your struggling 3,
Mm-hmm.
along with suggestions on, well, okay, now what do I do? And then what I have put together as an offer for your folks is if they want to take those 2 quizzes, they can just fire me off an email and I will sit down with them for about half an hour and kind of go through their results and give them some other kind of real kind of one-on-one where you can really start getting the most traction as fast as possible here. So the reason to take the quiz is if you really are interested in going, well, they did it, I'd like to do it. Let me go see what somebody who did it says I need to be doing or not doing. Because that's one of the big things. We talk very often about what we need to do.
Mm.
We don't talk often enough about what we need to ignore.
Yeah.
Because when I choose to do something like choosing to sit here and talk with you, which is lovely, means I'm not doing other things.
Yeah.
But we don't think about that enough. And so that's so true in an organization on the leadership level and every single person in the organization. And you multiply that across the span and it's unbelievable what a difference it makes.
100%, 100%. And especially if you're a people pleaser, right? Like that is, and that's very generous of you, Cheryl, to offer that. So just to reemphasize to our audience, she is offering take the quiz. She'd be happy to sit down one-to-one and actually have a conversation with you to understand what is it telling you, and how do you want to show up differently? I mean, that's the best way I would describe it, right? Like,
Yeah.
because if things are working for you, then you probably don't need to take the quiz.
If
If they're
you're at
not working
99th
for you,
percentile, yeah.
then you might want to, take some time to educate yourself and learn about what's working, what's not working. Lots of really great insight, Cheryl, and thank you for coming on today and
Oh,
sharing
it's
with
my
us.
pleasure.
I think we could spend a lot more time talking about all these different nuances.
Yes.
And I think at the essence what you said about people don't get up and in the morning and want to come in and do a bad job. They want to do well.
Mhm.
And so how do we help do that? How do we come in and make a difference and serve those that we're leading in a
Mhm.
authentic and very meaningful way?
Mhm.
And thank you for writing your book. I think it's phenomenal, and I'm so glad that it puts a lot of um, experience
Mhm.
into leadership principles. And so it's an easy read, but very impactful in how we trust each other
Mhm. Or
in
don't.
organizations, right?
Mhm.
Because the same principles apply, just like having to trust your guide to lead you through a safari, especially when it's out in the wild. It's not a
We were inside the
contained.
zoo. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Basically. Mm.
Yeah. Wow. Any parting words you would like to share with our audience? Or maybe share also your actual website. We'll put that in our link
Sure.
as well when people are listening to the podcast, but maybe just share that so that they can hear that from an
Sure.
audible standpoint.
So we are recalibrate.today. There is a .com. That's not us. So we're .today. Email is Cheryl@recalibrate.today. It's funny how that works. Also on LinkedIn, people can check out there. But really, I'd say the parting comment is thank you to everyone who's chosen to step up and lead because it's not easy. And all too often these days, we want to blame the leader.
Yeah.
And that's part of our allowing temper tantrums. We're not saying every single person here has responsibility. It's not about shifting it all off onto the leader who's horrible and you're perfect. So I think having the strength to resist that, but also to continue to develop yourself,
Yeah.
whatever it is, whether it's looking at this framework and going, hey, we rock anyway, but the people that really are doing the best, those are the ones that are always learning.
Yeah.
They don't ever rest. The ones, unfortunately, who aren't as good are usually the ones who are like, I don't need anything. It's
Yeah.
like, well,
It's so true.
I might beg to differ, right? So it's that being curious, right? And just saying, is what I'm doing serving me personally? Because that's a very important question as a leader, because you can't fill up everyone else's tank if yours is depleted.
100%. Oh my goodness.
And
100%.
then it's like, and am I leading this organization in a way that feels good to all of us?
Yeah.
Because you're going to have hard times, you're going to have deadlines, you're going to have fires to put out. But if it always is wretched, that should be a major clue, right? And if you've got other people around you that you can go, oh, what do you see that I'm missing? Cool. If you don't, there's plenty of people, like me, like you, lots of other people that can go, here's what I see from the outside, and can call it for you. But it's really just show yourself some grace, but also realize you can love on your people and
Mhm.
have really high standards. It's not an either or, because that's where we're getting bit right now. Right.
Yeah,
And
so
we're not
true.
doing that. And so the only other thing for the book that you have is the coffee table version.
Mhm.
And so that's my favorite, just because I'm a photographer and it's really tactile and it feels really good and it looks really cool. But if you want an ebook, it is available on Amazon. But the
Okay.
hardcover is only available from my website. And so I personally pack that out and send that out to people. And so that's depending on what people like. Both of those options are available. And then, yeah, take the quiz. Even if you don't want to talk to me, that's fine. But see what it tells you.
Yeah. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And we'll make sure that's in our link so that people have access to the quiz. But Cheryl's offering you a gift. And so take advantage of it,
Mhm.
right? It can really help you start to shift how you show up as a leader
Mhm.
and make a difference in the
Mhm.
world. I mean, that's why you're leading, right? You want to
Mhm.
have impact. So have a good impact.
Mhm.
Awesome. Cheryl, thank you. This has been lovely. The time went so fast.
Yes.
I try to keep our talks between 30 and 40 minutes.
Okay.
We went a little bit over that, and that's
Yeah.
okay. Lots of richness, lots of really good content. And so thank you. Thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for sharing what you've shared today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for the invitation and building the community you built. That's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. And I want to thank our audience again. We really appreciate you being here. If you take the quiz, let us know. Drop us a note on
Mhm.
LinkedIn or on Instagram. Let us know what you thought of the quiz. What did
Mhm.
you learn? And how will you show up differently as a leader? And if you're really curious about your leadership style, you can take our free quiz on willempowered.com. That's 1L. And that's there for you. It'll give you insight
Mhm.
as to how you're showing up as a leader. So thank you for being here with us today. And we look forward to seeing you at the next Will Talk podcast. Thanks again, Cheryl.
Thank you.